Here is how Vipassana meditation both gave me the wisdom to embrace and accept death and the experiential skill to live with that knowledge and with that wisdom, right? So death is just one of those things that is really hard to think about. It's really hard to talk about, right? Whenever it happens to one of our family members, it's just such a intense situation, and it's so, sad. And so when it comes to, the self and me dying, how have I come to term with my own death? And Vipassana meditation really helps on so many levels, right? The first one is really understanding that death is inevitable. And that's pretty easy because we all know everybody is going to die. And that is just the nature of things, right? Like that's just how reality is. We are all going to die. So when it comes to understanding that that's just a part of the universe, right? It doesn't matter if you're alive or not, right? The stars die, I mean. We only have one sun. Stars die, planets die, at the end of the universe, even black holes are going to die. So no matter what it is, if you are made up of atoms, if you have physical form, you are going to end. Your constituency is going to end, right? You being an object is going to end. And that's just true for everything. And that's just another reminder of impermanence, right? One of the teachings of Vipassana is impermanent. And the thing about Vipassana too is like it gives you the skill to actually live with that. So I can understand that first, death is inevitable. Now, what happens is, there is this ego, there's this sense of self, and I don't want to die because I want to persevere. Like, I want to survive, I want to live. And, this comes from simply being a life, right? In order to be a life that survives for X amount of time, from birth to death, you need to have this sense of taking care of yourself, keeping yourself safe, looking out for danger, and just having a good life, or just living, right? Doing everything that you need to do to live. And so this body's come equipped. This form has come equipped with, some just automatic things that are baked into our DNA so that, we have our flight or flight reflex. We are very motivated to at least, get food and have some shelter and stuff. And so those are already baked in. And from, I think arisen from that is like this sense of self, right? How can you protect yourself and take care of this life if you don't understand or have the experience of you as a self? And this is the first part where, this is really where that fear of death comes from, is this over-attachment to this idea of the self, which Vipassana has given me the insight to know that it isn't true. Yes, I'm alive, I'm here, but let's even look at that statement. When it comes to me and when it comes to you, I'll just use a very simple understanding of what the self is, and it's like this physical body and this mind, right? This is me. This me, this I, is it really I, right? I have a feeling of I in me, and it's like, oh, this is my body. Now the question is it my body? And the answer is no. Objectively, it is not my body. And what do I mean by that? Well, we all know my body's made up of atoms that have been here since the beginning of the universe, right? They've been here for billions of years. And these atoms have congregated for a small period of time. And then they're going to go, right? Like they're going to keep going for billions of years after I die. So is it true, right? Is it objectively true that this collection of atoms is mine? It's not true, because first of all, I was born X amount of years ago. And being born X amount of years ago, how can I own something that was here before me? Now, I won't get too deep into philosophy and then say, oh, I had an eternal soul. And I don't believe in that anyway. But just, saying I was born when I was born and I'll die when I die. With that knowledge, this collection of atoms is not mine. It would be more apt and more truthful to say that this collection of atoms, or these individual atoms, own me, right? Because they were here first, and now I've just come here. Now I keep using the words like I came or I'm alive, and it's hard to talk about and say there's no self without talking about the self, right? So with this idea or this attachment to the self, these atoms are separate from me. Now this is easy to understand mentally, right? But it still feels like mine. And it's really this feeling, right? Depending on how intense this feeling of this being mine is, that will cause this pain and the suffering around contemplating or even going through my own death, right? So one of the things in Vipassana that we learn is just this idea of impermanence. Everything changes, and that's true for this body, right? It's changing from the moment I'm born till I die by going through decay and growth and all these, transformations. And, my body 10 years ago is not the same body today, and it's not the same body tomorrow, right? There's this idea of impermanence, and it's true for, everything in existence. Like I said, everything, planets go from birth to death, like they come into being and they go out of being. And so this attachment to the self that came from the survival need, from the way that these atoms congregated and information is stored and collected, and the way that information is processed to make this living being, there needs to be this sense of self to protect, to take care of. But that's just what it is. It's just a sense of self, right? It's just a feeling of yourself, and it doesn't really exist. So how does Vipassana, right, help distance yourself, or how does it make that attachment less, right? And it does it by experience, right? Like, how can you experience non-detachment, or how can you experience non-attachment? That's what I meant to say. Non-detachment is attachment. Anyway, how can you experience attachment? And how you do that, right? I can give an example. You're doing breath meditation. It's inhaling and it's exhaling. This is something that, your body is doing. And when you're observing it, you don't have an attachment to the breath, right? Let's say an inhale is coming. You don't say, inhale, I want you to stay forever. You're my inhale, my favorite inhale. Exhale, I don't want you to come. Like, inhale, I just want you to be forever. No, you don't do that. Like, if you do that, you might hold your breath for 30 seconds and then you got to exhale. So then you exhale. Then when the exhale's happening, you don't say, oh, my exhale, this is so special. This is my exhale. This is like mine, like, you don't do that. You're just observing. The breath is coming in, breath is going out. So you're observing an experience, a sensation that's coming and going. And you're being equanimous. That's the other thing with Vipassana. And this practice is how to be equanimous. And you're being equanimous because when you're observing the breath, you're just observing it. You're not trying to grab it. You're not attaching yourself to it. You don't have any strong feelings, let's say, towards the breath. And then even when you move on to doing Vipassana, you're observing sensations in your body, and to these sensations too, right? It's a little easier to get attached to pleasant sensations that feel super good, and it's easy to have aversion towards sensations that don't feel so good, and start to have more attachment. But we are learning, just as the breath, it's coming and going. Like we're not invested in it. We're not having any strong feelings towards it. We're cultivating that practice with sensations in our bodies, right? It's just having this awareness, like, hey, this is what's here. It's popping up. It's going to stay for a while, and it's going to pop away. Now, how this is cultivating, right? If you're practicing equanimously, it's cultivating that sense of just, hey, I am not attaching myself to these sensations. And now what happens too, right, is when you're in a meditation session, thoughts will start popping up, and those thoughts will carry many things, right? Many memories will carry certain things. It'll show your habitual reactive patterns. It'll show your traumas. It'll show everything. And when you're meditating, you equanimously also observe that and return to your breath or return to your sensation. And now you're building how to have a more equanimous relationship with your thoughts, with your habit patterns, with your reactions, with your immediate responses or reactions. And that, when you're remain equanimous, right, it starts to you start to distance yourself from it, right? And it's just, hey, it's okay. Like it's just is what it is. Like this thought is here, that's fine. Just like this sensation is here, that's fine. Like this inhale is here, that's fine. I don't feel any strong way about any of these, right? And so in this way, right, you're starting at the breath, something that's really easy to not care about. You're building equanimity. You're moving to sensations. It's a little bit harder to be equanimous with because you can have varying sensations. Then, even thoughts and stuff and emotions and all these come up too. And then even with those, right, you're like, okay, let me just distance myself. And this is where it's really important because the sense of self, right, the sense of a personality, even that mentally you can know is impermanent, right? The same personality you had 10 years ago is probably not the same exact personality that is today and that will be 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, right? There's gradual changes. It's not overnight, immediate changes that you're going to be a different person tomorrow, but gradually this personality and characteristic traits, they too will change. And so when you notice them popping up, like let's say you have a certain level of patience, you also aren't too attached to say, well, I have a 6 out of 10 patience rating. 5 years from now, it could be 7 out of 10, right? 10 years, it could be 8, right? Like it can grow. So to be stuck and saying, okay, I have this much patience and this is who I am. And these things really irk me. And when you start to get attached to, certain personality and characteristic traits, you're having more attachment to I, right? You're having more attachment to this sense of the self, which also isn't true. Like I said, all these traits slowly change over time. So if you're super attached to being like 5 out of 10 patients, then when you're 6 out of 10 patients and 5 is no longer true, all this attachment that you had and all this, oh, this is who I am that you did is meaningless, right? It just like kind of faded. So what's the point of doing it in the moment? Like right now, if you're at a 6 out of 10 patients, there isn't any meaning to identify with that patience and say, well, this is who I am, and like actually believe it. And so you start to learn to say, okay, my patience is running low. You start to have this more objective, equanimous understanding of anything that might pop up in terms of what you identify as yourself. So, and this self is also super impermanent. Now this, at an experiential level, is what you're learning to do when you're focusing on your breath and you're focusing on your bodily sensations, is how to have this view, this detached, and not detached in a way that you're not facing it, but to not be so invested in it that its inevitable ending is going to cause you suffering. So anyway, when it came to, I'm just like meditating and it comes to death and I can objectively understand I will die, this attachment to the self starts to slowly fade, right? Because you're seeing all these things experientially. You're seeing all these things that you considered yourself, all these identifications that you've had. You kind of understand, right? You begin to understand, oh, these two are gonna change, and you like no longer are so invested in it. And that allows me, at least, to experientially come to terms with the fact that I am going to die. So that's how Vipassana helps. That's how Vipassana helps, at least me, come to terms with my death. And now when I'm experientially just living in my life, I see endings in me all the time. Like things always end. Like there are phases in my life where I like X, and then that ends and I no longer do X, right? I like stop doing like drugs because that I'm just no longer that person. I stop doing so many things. I'm like more patient now. I'm more energetic. I talk with people, right? And it's like I used to not do that as much or not be as comfortable doing it, and just always seeing this change. And it's like there's no point in getting attached to something that changes. So anyway, I hope that made sense. That's how Vipassana has helped me to experientially and at a deep level understand. Have a good one.